Welcome to General Safety Awareness Training, brought to you by Compliance Kings LLC, a Texas-based health and safety company. By the end of this course, you should be able to demonstrate knowledge of safety awareness in the workplace. You should be able to identify hazards, learn ways to protect yourself from workplace hazards, and understand generally accepted policies and procedures that make the workplace safer. At the end of each training section, you will take a test to determine your understanding of the material. You must score an 80% or better to pass and receive certification. Safety in the work environment. Workplace safety involves hazard identification and methods of control, such as engineering and administrative controls. Machine guards, policies, and procedures are examples of these two types of controls. When engineering or administrative controls cannot eliminate the hazard, personal protective equipment, PPE, is provided to you at no cost and is a last line of defense. Safety is described in your company's policies and procedures and supports a company's safety culture to ensure the safety and health of all workers within a workspace. You must be trained to be aware of unhealthy or potentially dangerous situations and ways to mitigate those hazards to an absolute minimum. Safety involves making smart decisions and communicating hazards up and down the chain of command. Safety may require you to intervene to prevent an injury. Hazard identification. Your employer should identify and document hazards before work begins by conducting walkthroughs and inspections of all workspaces, by reviewing processes, collecting sampling data, reviewing industry trends, reviewing controls, reviewing procedures, reviewing safety data sheets, reviewing other relevant data. Hazard identification should include people who are extremely knowledgeable of the process, from varying levels within the company, from different departments within the company, of sufficient authority as to affect the decision-making process, part of a safety committee, if your company has one, consultants in some cases. Hazard identification and you. Before going to work, you should understand the policies and procedures specific to your employer and your work. Ensure you have identified any potential problems that could occur by completing a Job Safety Analysis, JSA, work permit, and other necessary documentation. Verify you have a control measure in place for each potential hazard. Inspect all tools and equipment prior to use. Inspect all PPE. Always wear PPE correctly. Review safety data sheets, SDS, and read all product labeling. Report any conditions to your supervisor that could create an unsafe condition before beginning work. Other actions may be required. Always check with your supervisor if you have any doubts or are unsure. Some examples of physical hazards include explosive substances, flammables, excessive noise, radiation, fall hazards, sharp points, pinch points, temperature extremes, and stored energy. Some examples of health hazards include carcinogens, irritants, man-made material fibers such as asbestos and fiberglass, toxins, sensitizers, and mutagens which cause genetic mutations. The hierarchy of controls exists to establish best practices to reduce potential risks. They go in order from the best option to the last line of defense, beginning with engineering controls such as machine guards and ventilation, administrative controls such as policies and procedures, and PPE as a last line of defense. Personal protective equipment, PPE, is provided for you by your employer at no cost. PPE is designed to protect you in the event that a hazard cannot be controlled by any other means. PPE is a last line of defense. You will need to know the hazards associated with your job to understand what PPE is most appropriate. You will need to know how to select PPE, how to inspect PPE, how to put on and take off PPE, how to wear PPE correctly, and how to care for and store PPE. PPE is designed to protect your body from various hazards. Types include, but are not limited to, face and eye protection, hearing protection, head protection, toe and foot protection, fall protection, hand protection, respiratory protection, body protection, and alarms and monitors for atmospheric hazards such as H2S, carbon monoxide, lower explosive limit, oxygen content, and others. Most companies with 10 or more employees are required to have written safety policies and procedures. Written policies and procedures assist employees in their understanding of specific safety topics and the company's safety rules in general. Policies and procedures must be tailored to the specific needs of the company. They should also be made available to all employees anytime. Lastly, employees must receive training on those policies, which apply to their work area and job function. Behavior-based safety programs seek to provide peer-based observation concerning written programs and procedures, the observation process, reporting process, follow-up safety meetings. Observers must be trained and knowledgeable. BBS should involve people from different departments and at varying levels within the company in a peer-to-peer oversight program. The ultimate goal of BBS is to drive safety and health incidents down to zero. Every employee has the authority and responsibility to stop unsafe acts and conditions before they result in injury or damage. This is called Stop Work Authority. It involves stopping the process, notifying the appropriate authority of the stop, investigating conditions that required the stop, correcting deficiencies before resuming, and following up with your supervisor or other appropriate authority, such as safety representative. A job safety analysis, or JSA, is completed before engaging in a task. The purpose of the JSA is to break the job down into individual steps to more easily identify potential hazards and safety measures to control those hazards. The process involves completing the basic steps of the job, identifying potential hazards, procedures to be followed, and safety precautions. JSA should be completed with the whole work group present and contributing. Each member should write their name on the JSA to show participation. Alcohol and drug consumption or showing up for work under the influence of alcohol or illegal drugs is prohibited in the duty status. Likewise, abuse of prescription drugs is prohibited. Intoxicating drugs or drugs that can cause drowsiness, including over-the-counter medications, should be reported to your supervisor before going to work. This will allow them the opportunity to assess the work you will be performing and if you pose a hazard to yourself or others. Always keep medications in their original container for identification purposes. Lastly, it is your duty to report any circumstances that you believe could contribute to an accident to your supervisor immediately. Workplace violence and harassment are generally illegal in the workplace and could subject the offender to disciplinary action up to and including termination of employment. Remember, harassment is viewed from the eyes of the victim and therefore should be avoided. It's a good idea to refrain from any activity that creates a hostile or offensive work environment. Incident reporting and investigation. You are required to report all incidents to your supervisor immediately. You are required to participate in internal investigations. Each incident should be investigated by competent authority to determine root cause analysis and to develop measures to prevent a future occurrence. Short service employees, or SSEs, are employees that have been doing the job less than 6 months. They are statistically prone to higher incident rates. All SSEs must have a seasoned mentor assigned to them while engaged in work. All SSEs should be reported upon arrival at the job site to the senior person or foreman. Supervisors should conduct regular evaluations of SSEs to correct any deficiencies early on. SSEs are required to have no recordable injuries within the 6-month window, or they may not be released from the mentor until they have shown corrective action for a sustained period of time. The SSE program should be monitored by a safety committee that will steer the program and advise of corrective action or needed changes to the program. Vehicle accidents are the leading cause of workplace injuries and deaths. Therefore, it is imperative, before driving a vehicle, that you conduct a thorough inspection of the vehicle's components as a proactive measure. Items that should be inspected include: tires should be checked for tread depth and wear pattern. The vehicle's horn and light should work as designed. Seat belts should be checked for damage and to ensure they fasten securely. Mirrors should be checked and adjusted. Check the engine compartment for leaks and other signs of wear or damage. Check fire extinguisher, fill, and tags if one is provided. Check all belts and hoses. Check all fluid levels. Lastly, operate the vehicle and check the brakes and other components for smooth and safe operation. Route selection is another important aspect affecting a driver's safety. Factors that affect route selection include, but are not limited to: traffic. The shortest route may not be the fastest route. Expected or current weather conditions. Road conditions. Nighttime driving versus daylight driving. Schools. Areas of civil unrest. And whether or not you are hauling hazardous cargo. Other factors controlled by the driver that most likely bear the greatest outcome have to do with paying attention and not getting distracted. There are some things you should never do, such as text while driving or operate a vehicle while under the influence of drugs and/or alcohol. Speed kills. Drive at a safe speed for the conditions. Get plenty of rest before going on long trips. Don't get distracted with the radio, navigation, or other gadgets. Drive defensively and watch out for other drivers. Make regular stops to stretch. Follow at a safe distance, 1 car length or more for every 10 miles per hour of speed. Be patient and avoid road rage. Lastly, give right-of-way to emergency vehicles. Employers are required to notify employees of all chemical hazards in the workplace. Chemical hazards include those which cause physical and health hazards. As of December 1, 2013, all employees are required to receive HAZCOM training to the Globally Harmonized Standard, also known as GHS. Employers are required to maintain a list of all hazardous chemicals in the workplace. Employers are required to provide Safety Data Sheets, SDS, for all chemicals in each workspace. All chemical labeling must be consistent with GHS requirements. Exposure controls and PPE must be provided to employees to prevent hazards of exposure. Lastly, training must be provided specific to the substance: how to safely use the substance, safe storage, how to identify it in the event of a release, what to do in the event of an emergency, and what to do in the event of a spill are a few examples of required training. Environmental incidents are some of the most devastating and costliest occurrences a company could face. That is why it is imperative you do your part by reporting leaky equipment to your supervisor for repair. Inspect equipment used in the storage of hazardous material regularly for corrosion, damage, leaks, and wear. Use drip pans underneath leaking vehicles and equipment. Use secondary containment under mobile storage containers capable of containing 110% of the container's volume. Always store hazardous materials in the proper container and location. Spill containment should be provided by your employer. Use it to contain and clean up spills immediately if safe to do so. Lastly, never respond beyond your level of training, means, or ability. Ergonomics, also known as human factors engineering or fitting a person to a job, are the leading cause of lost workday injuries and illnesses. Risk factors include lifting heavy items, bending, reaching overhead, pushing and pulling heavy loads, working in awkward body postures, performing the same or similar tasks repetitively, pushing your body against hard or sharp surfaces, using vibrating tools or equipment. There are measures you can take to reduce the risks of musculoskeletal disorders, MSDs. Use hand trucks or get help lifting heavy loads. Bend your knees and keep your back straight when lifting loads. Work in a comfortable position. Use the correct tool for the job. Do range of motion exercises and stretch before manual work. Eat a healthy, well-balanced diet. Get plenty of sleep. Stretch regularly during the day. It would behoove you to recognize early signs of MSDs such as fatigue, stiffness, soreness, pain, tingling, numbness. If you recognize any signs of MSDs, report them immediately to your supervisor. Safe work permits are used to increase communication, ensure a system of pre-work checks are followed, and ultimately give the work crew permission to begin work when signed by competent authority or an approving official. Some examples of work permits include permit required confined space entry, hot work, lockout tagout, utilities hookup, certain types of elevated work, complex crane lifts, others as deemed appropriate by your company. Always know your company's procedures before going to work. Everyone's life could depend on it. Lockout-tagout is a method of controlling hazardous energy during repairs or maintenance operations. Lockout is a mechanical device used to prevent movement of a control, such as a lever, valve, or switch. Tagout is a warning device indicating a potential for injury if a control is operated. Never ignore warning devices. To do so could cause death or serious injury. Never remove a lock or tag unless you are the authorized person who installed it, and only after all affected personnel have been cleared of the area and warned the equipment is being re-energized. There is a very specific procedure for conducting a lockout-tagout operation. Most require a LOTO permit be issued. The following procedure is for installing a lockout device. Notify all affected employees, shut down equipment normally, deactivate the energy isolation device, lock out the energy isolation device, verify isolation by trying to operate the equipment if personnel are clear downstream. For removing a lockout device, verify the area around the equipment is clear and warn all affected employees. Ensure equipment is operationally intact. Verify the controls are in neutral. The authorized employee removes the lock, and affected personnel are notified of the equipment being brought back online. Fire safety is another very important part of working safely. All employees should keep their work areas clean and free from trash or other debris. Store flammable materials in a metal locker designed for flammable storage when not in use, and keep separate from oxidizers and incompatible materials. Smoke only in designated areas. Keep emergency exits clear. Keep access to electrical panels clear. Keep access to fire extinguishers clear. Never overload electrical outlets and extension cords. Participate in emergency action plan drills for fire on a regularly scheduled basis. Engage in hot work only in designated areas. Report all fire hazards to your supervisor immediately. All employers are required to have Emergency Action Plans, EAPs, for fire and medical emergency at a minimum. Others may be required, depending on geographic location and potential hazards. Some EAPs may require you to leave the area, and others may require you to shelter in place in a safe haven. Emergency action plans should be posted in a common area for all employees to review at will. Employers should require regular emergency action drills and that all employees participate. Make sure you read and understand your company's emergency action plans. If you have any questions or concerns about EAPs, inform your supervisor before going to work. Blood-borne pathogens, BBP, are microorganisms that can cause severe illness and even death. They are transmitted through contact with bodily fluids. Some deadly types of blood-borne pathogens include hepatitis B, hepatitis C, AIDS. The universal precaution is to assume all blood, saliva, and other bodily fluids are infected. Always follow your company's procedures and put on PPE before handling contaminated items and before rendering aid to the injured. If someone is injured or needs assistance, only respond to your level of training. If contact with bodily fluids occurs, immediately and thoroughly wash the affected area with soap and water. If contact with the eyes occurs, flush for 15 minutes with potable water. In all cases of contact with BBP, it is a good idea to follow up with a physician. Employees required to render first aid must first be trained by a nationally recognized source, such as the Red Cross or American Heart Association. Employees must hold a valid certificate or first aid card before engaging in first aid duties. Employees must be provided with PPE, sterile first aid materials sufficient for the workforce size and foreseeable conditions. Employees engaged in providing first aid must also be given the option for a no-cost hepatitis B vaccination and be provided with no-cost medical screenings. Hearing, once lost, never returns. Therefore, employees working in high-noise areas must have their hearing checked by a physician upon initial assignment, must be given an initial audiometric test upon hiring, must be given an annual audiometric test thereafter. Employees working in high-noise areas must be given hearing conservation training upon initial assignment and annually thereafter. Training should include the types of hearing protection available, how to select the appropriate type, how to put them on, and what to do if they are broken or defective. You are required to wear hearing protection anytime you are exposed to noise levels above 85 dB for an 8-hour work period. Anytime a safety sign indicates. If you cannot hear someone clearly 2 feet away from you talking normally. Occupational diseases can be caused by breathing contaminated air. Atmospheres contaminated with dust, fogs, gases, vapors, mist, smoke, sprays, and fumes can be potentially deadly or can cause severely debilitating lung and health issues. Some dangerous substances include, but are not limited to, crystalline silica, which causes silicosis, is found in frac sand, sand blasting operations, certain drilling additives, and other commercially available substances. Benzene causes leukemia and other cancers of the blood-forming organs. It is found in petroleum products, refineries, gasoline, diesel, and other products common in the workplace. Asbestos causes lung cancer and can be found around pipes, insulation, and is generally used as a fireproofing material. Fiberglass is a breathable, durable fiber which has been linked to increased risk of causing lung cancer. Other substances are toxic and can kill you, such as hydrogen sulfide, H2S, sulfur dioxide, SO2, and carbon monoxide, CO, to name a few. Respiratory protection is used when engineering controls and administrative controls cannot keep substance levels below exposure limits set by OSHA. Before wearing a respirator, you must be part of your company's respiratory protection program under OSHA 29 CFR 1910.134, which includes obtaining medical clearance, fit testing for the size and brand of respirator you will be using. Training should include when to use it, how to use it for routine tasks and during an emergency, how to put it on and take it off, limitations of respiratory equipment, cleaning and storage, types of respiratory protection available, and how to select the appropriate type for the task you are going to perform, how to conduct a positive and negative seal check. Additionally, your company should have a shave policy that states the area around and under the respirator must be clean-shaven to provide a good seal. There are two main types of respirators on the market today. The first type is an air purifying respirator, or APR, which filters out contaminants from the existing atmosphere. APRs are not recommended for use in IDLH environments. APRs come in full-face and half-face configurations with screw-on type filter canisters. Some contain a particulate pre-filter and charcoal for filtering out organic vapors. Filters should be changed if you smell anything coming through, if there is resistance, or as required by your company's standard operating procedure. The second type we will discuss are supplied air respirators, or SARs, which supply air from another source, such as a cylinder or breathing air compressor. There are two types of SARs: hose line or airline respirators and self-contained breathing apparatus, SCBAs. There are three types of SCBAs: work units, rescue units, escape packs. Respirators should be worn if your employer requires you to wear one. Anytime a substance is above the OSHA permissible exposure limit, or PEL, for a given work period. You should always wear a SAR with full face piece and escape pack during confined space entry, where a hazardous atmosphere exists. Use can also be voluntary, even if permissible exposure limits are below the exposure level. Immediately dangerous to life or health, IDLH, confined space environments are called permit-required confined spaces. Before entry into a permit-required confined space, employers must have trained rescue personnel and equipment on standby. The respirator type must meet the assigned protection factor, APR, for the conditions such as low O2, H2S, benzene, SO2, etc. Respirators should be of the positive pressure SAR airline type with a full face piece and an escape pack, or a positive pressure SCBA with full face piece. Breathing air is required to be grade D air and should not have any odors added. Use of breathing air compressors is allowed in IDLH environments if they are positioned upwind of work area. Your employer may require you to use power tools as part of your job duties. All employees should be trained to safely use tools needed to do their job. Training should be completed before initial assignment and any time tools or methods change. Tools should be inspected before use. Check to ensure guards are installed correctly and secure. Inspect electrical cord insulation and cord condition. Check to see if the tool has a third prong, ground prong, and operationally check the tool to ensure it is in good working order. Select the correct tool for the job and use it as it was intended. If you find a discrepancy during your inspection of the tool, tag and remove it from service. Never attempt to repair tools unless you are qualified and authorized to do so by your employer. Electricity can be deadly and is often a hidden killer. Common sense rules go a long way in preventing electrical shocks. Never use electrical tools in a wet environment. Never use electrical tools with missing insulation, bare wires or wire ends, damaged or crushed cords, cords with signs of shade tree repairs indicated by the use of electrical tape and/or wire nuts. Always use a ground fault circuit interrupter or GFCI connected at the outlet end before attaching extension cords or tool cords. Do not overload electrical outlets, extension cords, or other devices. Heat is a good indicator of a circuit that is overloaded. Stay at least 10 feet away from power lines of 50,000 volts or less. Add distance for power lines over 50,000 volts per OSHA regulations. Never repair electrical tools or electrical circuits unless you are trained, qualified, and authorized to do so by your employer. Use lockout/tagout for all maintenance and repairs of electrical equipment and systems. Material handling equipment is an irreplaceable asset for most companies. Safe operation is paramount. Never operate a forklift, crane, or other equipment unless you are trained, certified, and authorized to do so by your employer. Always conduct a pre-start inspection before operating equipment and complete the corresponding check sheet. Know and observe the limitations of all equipment you operate. Wear the required PPE established by your employer. Follow procedures established by your employer for safe operation, such as speed limits, use of horns, lights, backup guides, etc. Stay clear of power lines, 10 feet minimum, bridges, and other overhead obstructions. Chock the wheels of all equipment when not in use to prevent them from unintended movement. Use of ladders, like all other tools, requires training for safe use. Employees should be trained before using ladders to the specific type they will be using. Ladders are typically used to get to and from elevated surfaces. Ladders come in two classifications: fixed ladders, portable ladders. Ladders should be inspected before every use to ensure they are in good working order. Use the 4-to-1 rule when using extension ladders. For every 4 units in height, the base should be out 1 unit. Always extend ladders at least 3 feet or 1 meter above the landing. You can work from ladders if your belt buckle does not extend beyond either side rail and if you can safely maintain 3 points of contact. Proper ladder foot placement is critical for stability. Never place a ladder on an uneven surface, slippery surface, or soft substrate. Support should be used at the top of the ladder, or it should be tied off at the top if possible to prevent it from shifting. Never use metal ladders around electricity. Tag and remove from service any ladder found to be defective or damaged during your tool inspection. Scaffolds are elevated work platforms. They must be installed and modified only under the supervision of a competent authority. Scaffolds are required to be tagged, indicating all hazards and any required PPE. Always read the scaffold tag before use and comply with all recommendations. If the scaffold tag is missing, do not use it. Scaffolds are required to be inspected each shift by competent authority who will date and sign off on the scaffold tag. Scaffolds may not be modified by the work crew in any way unless under the supervision of a competent authority. Scaffolds are required to have an access ladder. Do not climb down scaffolding braces or cross members. Some scaffolding requires the use of personal fall protection devices, which will be indicated on the scaffold tag. Some scaffolding requires special engineering due to its complexity and height. Fall protection comes in many forms. Engineered designs such as handrails, midrails, toe boards are primarily on permanent work platforms. They must meet OSHA criteria in height, construction, and durability. Fall devices such as ladder climbing devices, safety nets, retractable lifelines, and static lines are other types of fall protection. They must also meet OSHA criteria. Personal fall arrest systems include a full body harness, tie-off point, fall brake, and lanyard. Each component must be designed for that purpose with a 5,000-pound static capacity. Fall protection must be worn whenever working above 4 feet for general industry and 6 feet for construction when determined by your employer. Employees must be shown how to select, put on, use, wear, and care for PPE. Employees must also know the limitations of PPE and how to get out of it if needed in the event of an emergency. Lastly, there must be a fall plan established and rehearsed for rescue in the event of a fall. Excavations are holes or channels dug below the Earth's surface. You should always check for underground utilities before digging by calling 811 or the designated number for your area. If the excavation is deeper than 4 feet, OSHA rules apply, which include: construction must be supervised by competent authority. The excavation must have sufficient shoring to prevent cave-in. Must be sloped accordingly, dependent on soil type. It must have an ingress and egress ladder every 25 feet or less. OSHA may consider the excavation a confined space if it meets 3 criteria. If it's limited in entry or exit, not designed for continuous human occupancy, able to be bodily entered. Some excavations require fall protection and a lifeline. Lastly, an excavation is capable of having a hazardous atmosphere. Anytime your employer keeps medical records or exposure records, you have a right to access those records upon request. They are required to be kept by your employer for the length of your employment plus 30 years. Records not considered medical records or exposure records include blood and urine samples as a result of drug-alcohol testing, records concerning health insurance claims, trade secrets concerning chemical substance mixtures. If you would like to access any medical or exposure records your employer may have, contact your employer's designated representative. Heat illnesses are a preventable form of work-related illness. Engineering controls include air conditioning, such as air-conditioned crane or construction equipment cabs, air conditioning in break rooms. Increased ventilation, cooling fans, local exhaust ventilation at points of high heat production or moisture, such as exhaust hoods in laundry rooms, reflective shields to redirect radiant heat, insulation of hot surfaces, such as furnace walls, elimination of steam leaks. Employers should have an emergency action plan in place that specifies what to do if a worker has signs of heat-related illness and ensures that medical services are available if needed. Employers should take steps that help workers become acclimatized, gradually build up exposure to heat, especially workers who are new to working in the heat or have been away from work for a week or more. Gradually increase workloads and allow more frequent breaks during the first week of work. Workers must have adequate safe drinking water close to the work area and should drink small amounts frequently. Rather than being exposed to heat for extended periods of time, workers should, wherever possible, be permitted to distribute the workload evenly over the day and incorporate work-rest cycles. If possible, physical demands should be reduced during hot weather or heavier work scheduled for cooler times of the day. Rotating job functions among workers can help minimize overexertion and heat exposure. Workers should watch out for each other for symptoms of heat-related illness and administer appropriate first aid to anyone who is developing a heat-related illness. In some situations, employers may need to conduct physiological monitoring of workers. Workers should be aware that use of certain personal protective equipment, in other words, certain types of respirators and impermeable clothing, can increase the risk of heat-related illness. In some situations, Special cooling devices can protect workers in hot environments, such as insulated gloves, insulated suits, reflective clothing, or infrared reflecting face shields. Thermally conditioned clothing might be used for extremely hot conditions. For example, a garment with a self-contained air conditioner in a backpack. A garment with a compressed air source that feeds cool air through a vortex tube. A plastic jacket whose pockets can be filled with dry ice or containers of ice. Heat stroke, the most serious form of heat-related illness, happens when the body becomes unable to regulate its core temperature. Sweating stops, and the body can no longer rid itself of excess heat. Signs include confusion, loss of consciousness, and seizures. Heat stroke is a medical emergency that may result in death. Call 911 immediately. Heat exhaustion is the body's response to loss of water and salt from heavy sweating. Signs include headache, nausea, dizziness, weakness, irritability, thirst, and heavy sweating. Heat cramps are caused by the loss of body salts and fluid during sweating. Low salt levels in muscles cause painful cramps. Tired muscles, those used for performing the work, are usually the ones most affected by cramps. Cramps may occur during or after working hours. Heat rash, also known as prickly heat, is skin irritation caused by sweat that does not evaporate from the skin. Heat rash is the most common problem in hot work environments. Recommended treatment options for heat stroke victims are: call 911. While waiting for help, place the worker in shady, cool area. Loosen clothing and, if possible, remove outer clothing. Fan air on the worker and apply cold packs under their armpits. Wet the worker with cool water and apply ice packs. Use cool compresses on inner thighs, wrist, and forehead. Provide fluids, preferably water, as soon as possible. Stay with worker until help arrives. Recommended treatment options for heat exhaustion include: have workers sit or lie down in a cool, shady area. Give worker plenty of water or other cool beverages to drink. Cool worker with cold compresses and ice packs. Take the employee to a clinic or emergency room for medical evaluation or treatment if signs or symptoms worsen or do not improve within 60 minutes. The employee should not return back to work that day without the recommendation of a physician. Recommended treatment options for heat cramps include: have worker rest in shady, cool area. Worker should drink water or other cool beverages. Wait a few hours before allowing worker to return to strenuous work. Have workers seek medical attention if cramps don't go away. Recommended treatment options for heat rash include: try to work in a cooler, less humid environment when possible. Keep the affected area dry. Risk factors that contribute to cold stress include dampness and humidity, clothing, predisposed health conditions such as hyperthyroidism, hypertension, and diabetes, poor physical conditioning. Common cold stress injuries include hypothermia, abnormally low body temperature, frostbite, which is freezing of the skin or underlying tissue, trench foot, which causes tissues to die from lack of oxygen due to constricted blood flow from the feet, typically from prolonged cold, wet feet. A key part of understanding cold stress includes learning about the symptoms. Hypothermia has two variations of symptoms. For mild symptoms, an exposed worker is alert. He or she may begin to shiver and stomp their feet in order to generate heat. Moderate to severe symptoms include: as the body temperature continues to fall, symptoms will worsen and shivering will stop. The worker may lose coordination and fumble with items in the hand, become confused and disoriented. He or she may be unable to walk or stand, Pupils become dilated, pulse and breathing become slowed, and loss of consciousness can occur. In this condition, a person could die if help is not received immediately. Frostbite is another cold injury. It is identified by reddened skin with gray-white patches, numbness in the affected part. Area may feel firm or hard. Blisters may occur in the affected part in severe cases. Trench foot is identified by redness of the skin, swelling, numbness, and blisters are possible. Cold stress treatment is as follows. Hypothermia can be a life-threatening situation. Seek medical attention for moderate to severe symptoms. Move the person to a warm, dry area. Remove wet clothing. Provide dry blankets, warm packs, warm beverages, and call 911 immediately if the person loses consciousness. For frostbite, do not massage frozen tissue, and do not immerse in hot water. Move the person to a warm, dry area. Remove wet clothing, and provide dry blankets, warm packs, and warm beverages. Seek medical attention. Trench foot, move the person to a warm, dry area. Remove wet shoes and socks, dry the feet. Warm the feet with blankets, warm packs. Seek medical attention if warranted. Studies show the average person spends 90,000 hours at work over their lifetime. Therefore, the majority of our exposure in terms of time comes while we are at work. You are required to work safely and follow all of your company's policies and procedures as a condition of employment. Do everything you can to return home every day the same way you arrived. Look out for yourself, your company, and your coworkers. Take responsibility for safety in your work area and speak up when needed. If you see it, you own it in terms of safety.